You wake up, no alarm, no commute, no inbox. The sun has just cleared the ridge above the valley. This sounds like a vacation. It is not a vacation. What do I do to still be alive by tonight? That is the question. Not what do I do for work, something older, something with more teeth. And the answer consumed almost every waking hour of every human life for hundreds of thousands of years. But not in the way you think. Because somewhere between the bone tools and the campfire, ancient humans found time that looked from this distance a lot like leisure, like art, like gossip. Anthropologist Marshall Sahlins once called them the original affluent society, people who met their needs in fewer hours per day than you spend in a single work meeting, people who rested without guilt, made things that didn't need to exist, and painted horses on cave walls by torchlight in near total darkness. They were not grinding through survival every second. They were also arguing, singing, sitting beside fire, doing what looks, from where we stand, suspiciously like nothing at all. So what exactly were they doing all day? The answer is stranger than the question. The morning that is not your morning. You open your eyes. The fire from the night before has dropped to coals. Beside you, several other bodies stir. Not a family in the nuclear sense, but a band. People who have lived together long enough to know each other's breathing in the dark. The group is small. Think about the size of a school classroom, roughly 15 to 30 people. Except these are every person you will ever know. There are no strangers sleeping 3 feet from you. There are no acquaintances. Everyone here is either essential to your survival or a threat to it, and most are both. Before you eat, before you decide which direction to walk, there is a negotiation, not a formal one. No one stands up and chairs a meeting. But decisions get made through looks, through the weight of who deferred to whom yesterday, through a silence that everyone reads correctly. Where does the group move today? The water source upstream is 2 hours north. The plain to the east had antelope tracks 3 days ago, but 3 days ago is a long time. The old woman with the bad knee, does she set the pace today, or does the group leave her a cache and circle back? Getting this wrong means someone dies, not metaphorically, not professionally, dies. You eat what was left from the night before, if anything was left. You drink, then you move. Movement is the baseline condition of your life. Not commuting, there is no fixed destination. Movement as searching, movement as the work itself. Your feet read the ground the way a craftsman reads a material. The calluses are in exactly the right places. You know, soil consistency, grass moisture, the angle of shadows at this hour in this season. You have been learning this particular stretch of land since you were old enough to walk beside an adult without slowing them down. You are not bored. Boredom is a luxury that predictable environments produce. Nothing about your environment is predictable. 3 hours into the walk, you cross a dry stream bed you crossed 6 days ago. Something is different. You stop. The others stop behind you without being told. Something has changed here since you passed through last. Something with weight came through recently. You study the ground for a long moment. The group waits, gathering as a way of knowing the world. The word foraging sounds like a chore. It is not a chore. Your hands move before your eyes do. You know which berries are safe this month, and which ones were safe last month and are now something else entirely. You know that the tubers near the dry stream bed are edible after processing, but lethal before it. Someone died learning that. Probably more than one person. The knowledge passed down anyway, refined across generations by trial and by catastrophic failure, and now it lives in your hands without your having to think about it. This is not instinct. Instinct is what the animal across the valley has. What you have is something stranger, accumulated knowledge worn smooth by repetition until it feels like instinct but isn't. The gathering takes hours, not because you are slow. By any measurable standard, you are extraordinarily efficient. But the territory is large, edible material is dispersed, and you are feeding multiple people, not just yourself. Studies of hunter-gatherer societies still practicing subsistence foraging in the 20th century, the Hadza of Tanzania, the Kung of the Kalahari, consistently found that women provided the majority of the group's caloric intake through gathered plant material. Not the hunts. The daily, quiet, unglamorous work of knowing which route to dig and when. The hunt gets the paintings. The gathering fed the people who made them, knowing which plant communities indicate water nearby, knowing which ones follow the edge of a buried watercourse you can't see. You stop walking and crouch beside a particular cluster of leaves. The soil here is darker than it should be for the current season. You file that away. Information is the most valuable thing your group carries. More valuable than any single tool, more valuable than any single kill. And information lives in speech, which is why you talk while you work, constantly, trading observations the way a later civilization will trade goods. What you saw, what your mother told you she saw, what that combination means for where you should look tomorrow. By midday, you have covered significant ground. Your carrying load is substantial. The tracks you noticed in the dry stream bed this morning haven't left your mind. A large animal, favoring one side, moving slowly, moving toward the low hills where the shade is heavy and the grass stays green longer. You mentioned this to the two hunters walking beside you. They already noticed. The hunt is longer and stranger than the painting. The cave paintings show the moment. The spear already in the air, the animal already turning, everything frozen at the peak of drama. The painting does not show the 6 hours before. You have been tracking since before noon, not running, reading the ground at a walking pace, following a narrative written in displaced soil and bent grass, and the particular way a large animal distributes its weight when one foreleg is compromised. This animal is injured. Injured animals rest more. You know where animals in this territory rest when they need to rest. You are not faster than the animal. You are not stronger. You are more patient, and you carry a memory the animal does not, memory of the last time and the time before that, and what the low hills look like in the dry season when the water holes narrow and the options shrink. This is called persistence hunting. Not a dramatic ambush, a long, patient calculation, hours of reading and following and cutting off escape routes through shared understanding that needs no words to function. You and the other hunters have been doing this together for years. You know how each person moves, where each person will be when the moment comes, without looking. The kill happens fast, and then the real work begins. Butchering a large animal is a technical discipline that takes years to acquire. Where you cut, in what order, which parts travel, and which parts are consumed here. These decisions determine how much of the animal you recover, how quickly you can move if a predator follows the smell of blood, how far the meat can go before it turns. Every sequence has a logic built from accumulated experience and from errors that were educational and expensive. You work quickly. The light is already shifting. By the time you reach camp, you have been on your feet for most of 10 hours. The load is heavy. The day is nearly done, and then the group eats. And this is not just nutrition. After dark and the invention of everything else. There is a theory, careful, tentative, persistent, that fire did not just change what humans ate, it changed what humans were. Before fire, night was darkness and danger and nothing else. After fire, night became the first room, the first enclosed space, the first place where the predators could not come, and the day had no more claim on you. Archaeological evidence at ancient hearth sites suggests that early humans spent substantial time at fires after dark without sleeping, just sitting. And what the evidence suggests happened in those hours is specific and strange. The conversation shifted. During the day, speech was practical. Resource location, movement decisions, the social tensions that needed managing before they became dangerous. But around the fire at night, something else emerged. Stories. Not what happened today, what happened before you were born. What the world was like before your grandfather's grandfather walked it. Why the river bends where it bends, and what that means. This is the oldest category of human speech, and we have not one recorded word of it. But we have the residue, ochre pressed into cliff faces, in patterns with no survival purpose. Small carved figures made with tools that required patience and skill and time that went beyond what the task demanded. Marks scratched into bone that encode no practical information we can identify. Evidence, in other words, that at some point between the hunting and the sleeping, humans made things that did not need to exist. Art is what happened when the day's demands were temporarily satisfied, And there was still fire and still time and still something in the human animal that needed to make meaning out of material. You are sitting beside that fire now. The child next to you is asking about the painted horses on the rock, overhang, 2 days' walk to the east. Who made them, what they mean, why they are there. You are about to answer. The answer will take a long time. It will be everything you know about where you came from and why it matters. The radical ordinariness of ancient leisure. Here is the part that consistently surprises researchers who study this seriously. Marshall Sahlins, writing in 1966 about what he called the original affluent society, argued something that still sits uncomfortably with how we prefer to imagine prehistoric life. Hunter-gatherers, based on observations of comparable societies before those societies were disrupted. The Hadza, the Kung, the Aboriginal Australians of the desert interior, typically spent somewhere between 3 and 5 hours per day on subsistence activities, acquiring food, processing it, maintaining tools. The rest of the time they were not working. Not because life was easy. Life was brutal and medically precarious and statistically short. But its structure was different from ours. Concentrated effort followed by genuine rest. Long, unscheduled stretches that would look, from the outside, like idleness. You sleep in the afternoon sometimes. The afternoon is hot and your body needs it, and there is nothing productive to do at this particular moment. You know, with certainty built from experience, that the evening will require you to be sharp. You groom each other, not as social performance, as biology. The physical proximity and touch that move through your group are doing structural work, maintaining trust, renewing the small daily signals that hold an alliance together. The primates closest to you in evolutionary terms invest enormous time in this behavior. It is not optional. It is what keeps the group coherent under pressure. You play. The children play constantly. They are learning the terrain, learning the social rules, learning to coordinate bodies through games that look recreational and function as training. The adults play too. Your language does not have a word for the boundary between recreation and rehearsal, because the boundary does not usefully exist. You sit and do what a 21st century observer would call nothing. Your nervous system is not idle. You are monitoring sound, tracking the wind, aware of the position of every person in your group. The quiet is not empty, but it is, by any reasonable measure, rest. Everything they made that did not need to exist. The flint tool is functional. It cuts, it scrapes, it serves a clear purpose and would fail that purpose if made badly. But some of the flint tools recovered from ancient sites are made better than they need to be, more symmetrical than accuracy requires. Worked to a fineness that the task does not demand. Someone spent extra time. Someone cared about something that was not strictly survival. The beads are stranger. Small shells, perforated and strung, found at sites in North Africa and the Levant, dating to a period roughly 100,000 years ago. The earliest recognizable evidence of modern human behavior in the archaeological record. The beads had no caloric value. They were worn on the body. They were made to be seen. They were, in other words, the first recorded act of communicating identity through what you put on your skin. Not tools, not food. A declaration. This is who I am. Addressed to people who already knew you and would still understand the communication differently once you were wearing it. Then there are the caves. Some of the most extraordinary paintings in the Paleolithic record were made deep inside cave systems, not near the entrance, not in spaces where natural light reached. Chambers so far from the surface that the artists worked in near total darkness, by single flame, sometimes lying on their backs, sometimes suspended above ground on wooden scaffolding. The deliberate sensory deprivation of those conditions was likely the point. What happens to the human mind in complete darkness, in silence, with only a small moving flame? The images painted in those conditions, horses, aurochs, hands, patterns, were not casual decoration. They were made with intention and difficulty and planning by people who traveled deep into the earth to make them. This is not art with a capital A. It is something older and less categorizable, the human reflex to make meaning out of matter, operating independently of whether meaning is strictly necessary for survival. This afternoon, you are making something, not because you have to, because the material is good and your hands know how, and there is a satisfaction in the making that exists before and outside of language. The finished object will tell something to the people who see it. They will understand without being taught to. They grew up inside the same language of objects, the complete day, without nostalgia. So, what did they do all day? They moved, and in moving, read the world at a resolution we have largely lost. They gathered, and in gathering, carried generations of knowledge in their hands without knowing they were carrying it. They hunted through patience rather than force, collaborative and quiet, coordinating bodies that understood each other without language for what they were doing. They talked constantly, the practical and the mythological running together in the same breath, no boundary between them. They rested without guilt. They made things that didn't need to exist. They went into the dark and put their hands against stone walls and pressed ochre into the outline and left a mark that would survive them by 50,000 years. They were not idle. They were not grinding. They were operating at the full bandwidth of what a human being is when the only structure is the one the landscape imposes and the only schedule is the one the season sets. Was it better? The question is the wrong shape. It was not better. Children died of things that are now trivially treatable. Violence between groups was real and not rare. The old and injured were burdens the group could sometimes not absorb. The margin between enough and nothing was narrow, and everyone knew it, all the time. But inside that hardship, something else was also true. The day had a shape that a human body recognized as a human day. Work and rest were not in opposition. The social world and the practical world were the same world. The people around you were people you had known your entire life, and they would know you until one of you was gone. The first office was invented roughly 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, when administrators needed a fixed place to coordinate grain surpluses and labor allocations and tax obligations for a city too large for any one person to hold in their head. A room full of clay tablets. A room full of people whose job was managing what other people did. Before that, for hundreds of thousands of years, the day belonged to whoever was living it. History preserved the names of the administrators. It did not preserve the name of the person who spent an afternoon lying in the shade after a successful hunt, watching clouds move across a landscape they knew better than any map that would ever be drawn. They did not leave a record of themselves. They left a child's handprint pressed into wet ochre on a cave wall, preserved by accident for 50,000 years.